The Arizona sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the cracked earth with a white-hot intensity. Miriam squinted, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, her gaze fixed on her husband, Elias. He had been unnervingly quiet for the last hour, a tense silence that felt heavier than the oppressive heat. Beside him, his brother Caleb shifted impatiently in his saddle, his callous eyes scanning the endless horizon of saguaros and rust-colored rock. "Why are we stopping here, Elias?" Miriam asked, her voice raspy from dust and thirst. "There's no shade, not even a whisper of a breeze." Elias dismounted, his movements stiff as he avoided her questioning gaze. "The horses need a rest," he mumbled, though the animals seemed no more fatigued than they had been an hour ago. "And you look tired." Caleb let out a derisive snort, a cruel smirk twisting his sun-chapped lips. "She's always tired, too delicate for this country." A cold knot of dread tightened in Miriam's stomach. This wasn't a rest stop. Before she could voice her fear, Caleb lunged, his hand a vice as he grabbed the reins of her mare. The horse whinnied, startled. "What are you doing?" Miriam cried, her hands flying to the saddle horn. Elias finally met her eyes, his own devoid of the warmth she once knew. They were cold, hard stones. "The land was always meant for our family, Miriam. Your name on the deed was a mistake, an insult." He deliberately unhooked her canteen from the saddle. "It's a long walk back to anywhere from here, but this land, it will be worth our sacrifice." He tossed her canteen to Caleb, who caught it with a triumphant grin. They didn't say another word. They spurred their horses, kicking up a cloud of ochre dust that choked her. Miriam stood frozen, watching the two figures shrink into the shimmering heat waves, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the vast, silent desert as her intended tomb. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The dust settled, and an oppressive silence fell, broken only by the hum of the cicadas and the pounding in Miriam's ears. The sun, a merciless white orb in a bleached blue sky, beat down on her. For a moment, she was paralyzed, her mind refusing to accept the reality of the two figures shrinking into the shimmering heat haze. Elias, Caleb, they had left her. A primal scream of rage and despair tore from her raw throat, but the vast, empty landscape swallowed it whole. Panic gave way to a cold, hard clarity. "The desert doesn't care about your tears," her father's voice echoed in her memory, a ghost from a gentler time. "It only respects strength and sense." Sense. She had to move. Not east after them. West, towards the jagged, purple peaks of the Rincon Mountains, miles away. They promised shade, perhaps even water. She began to walk, her steps deliberate, conserving every drop of energy. Her gaze swept the ground, searching for the telltale green of a palo verde tree or the path of a dry wash, an arroyo, where water might linger beneath the sand. Hours bled into one another. The sun climbed to its zenith, stealing the moisture from her body. Her tongue felt thick, her lips cracked. The world began to waver at the edges. Her father's lessons, once clear, became a jumbled mess of whispers in her heat-addled brain. Was she supposed to follow the birds or avoid them? She stumbled, her knee hitting the scorching earth with a sharp cry. Pushing herself up, she saw it, a dark shape on the horizon. It wasn't a mountain or a cactus. It moved. A person, a mirage born of desperation. Hope, fragile and agonizing, surged through her. She tried to call out, but only a dry rasp escaped. She took a step, then another, before her legs buckled. The sand rushed up to meet her, the world turning to a blinding white, then to nothing at all. The dust from my father's funeral had barely settled back onto the parched Arizona soil. I stood on the porch of the ranch house he'd built with his own two hands, the deed now legally mine. The scent of creosote bush, sharp and clean after a brief morning rain, filled the air. This land wasn't just property. It was a library of memories, every rock and cactus a story from my childhood. Elias came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. His touch was supposed to be a comfort, a promise of a shared future on this vast expanse. "It's a lot to manage, Miriam," he murmured into my hair, his voice smooth as polished river stone. "But we'll do it. We'll honor your father's legacy together." I leaned back against him, wanting to believe every word. My father had been wary of Elias, seeing a flicker of greed in his eyes that I, blinded by love, had dismissed as ambition. Now, with Dad gone, Elias' brother, Caleb, had started spending more time at the ranch. I'd see him watching from the shade of the barn, his gaze lingering on the horizon as if he were measuring it for a coffin. Caleb and I were talking, Elias continued, his tone casual. The eastern boundary is unclear. We should ride out tomorrow, all three of us, trace the line, make sure we know exactly what we're working with. It sounded practical, responsible. The perfect suggestion from a loving husband ready to be my partner in all things. I agreed without hesitation, a knot of grief in my chest loosening at the thought of his steadfast support. I trusted him. I trusted him with my father's legacy, with my future, with my life. That trust was my greatest mistake. Consciousness was a cruel tide, pulling her under into darkness only to throw her back onto the shore of pain. Miriam's reality fractured into fleeting images. The gentle, rhythmic sway of being carried. A weathered, kind face peering down at her, lips moving without sound. The cool touch of a damp cloth on her blistered skin. The world was a blur of ochre earth and impossibly blue sky, seen through eyelids too heavy to fully open. When she finally awoke, it was to a profound stillness. The oppressive sun was gone, replaced by the cool, earthy scent of clay and dried herbs. She lay on a soft pallet of furs inside a circular dwelling, its walls made of packed earth that kept the heat at bay. A sliver of light entered from a single opening, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A woman with deep-set, intelligent eyes and hair woven into two long, silver-streaked braids sat nearby, grinding something in a stone bowl. She noticed Miriam was awake and offered a small, reassuring smile. The woman rose and brought a clay cup to Miriam's lips. Water. Not the tepid, metallic taste from her canteen, but cool, clean water that felt like life itself trickling down her raw throat. Miriam drank greedily at first, then coughed, her body too weak for her thirst. The woman gently steadied the cup, murmuring soft words in a language Miriam didn't understand, her tone a universal balm of comfort and care. Miriam's eyes filled with tears, not of despair, but of overwhelming relief. She was alive. Someone had found her. Here, in the quiet safety of this humble home, cared for by strangers who expected nothing in return, the fragile hope she had clung to in the desert finally had room to breathe. The ordeal was over. A new, uncertain chapter had begun. The 3 years that followed were a quiet rebirth, measured not in days or weeks, but in the slow healing of sun-blistered skin and the gradual mending of a shattered spirit. The woman who saved her, whose name she learned was Alara, and her people became Miriam's silent guardians. They communicated through gestures at first, then through shared tasks, grinding corn, weaving baskets, tending to the hardy desert plants that provided their medicine. They taught her their language, a tongue that spoke of the earth, the sky, and the subtle shifts of the wind. The desert that had almost been her tomb became her classroom. She learned to read the land not as a threat, but as a provider. She could now trace the faintest animal tracks, identify the plants that held water in their roots, and predict the weather by the color of the sunset. Her body grew lean and strong, her hands calloused, her eyes holding the patient watchfulness of a predator. Her grief for her father remained, a constant ache in her heart, but the searing rage she felt toward Elias and Caleb cooled, hardening from a wildfire into a sharp, cold blade of purpose. In the stillness of the desert nights, under a blanket of stars, so bright they felt close enough to touch, her plan took shape. She wasn't just going to survive, she was going to reclaim what was hers. She would use the very knowledge this land had given her to dismantle them. She would become a ghost from their past, a woman they would never recognize, returning to claim not just her inheritance, but her justice. The desert gives, but it also takes, Miri. My father's words echoed in my memory, his voice as warm and weathered as the leather of his saddle. We'd be sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun bleed across the vast Arizona sky, painting the distant mesas in shades of orange and purple. For him, This land wasn't just dirt and rock. It was a living legacy, a partner in a lifelong dance. He taught me its rhythms, the scent of creosote after a rare downpour, the silent language of the coyotes, the resilience of the saguaro standing sentinel against the heat. When I brought Elias home, my father was polite but reserved. He saw the way Elias looked at the horizon, not with the reverence of a native son, but with the calculating gaze of a prospector. Elias saw acres and value. My father saw a soul. Still, I was in love, blinded by a charm as dazzling and deceptive as a desert mirage. I believed his promises were as solid as the ground beneath my feet. Then, the heart of the ranch fell silent. My father's passing left a void as immense as the landscape he adored. In the sterile quiet of a lawyer's office in Phoenix, the will was read. Everything, the house, the livestock, every last acre stretching to the blue-hazed mountains, was left to me. Solely to me. I felt Elias' hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting. "We'll manage it together, my love," he whispered, his voice smooth as polished stone. But when I looked up, his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the map of the property spread across the table. And in their depths, I saw a flicker of hunger so sharp and possessive it sent a shiver of cold through my grief. It was the first tremor of the earthquake that would soon shatter my world. The final confrontation wasn't in a courtroom or an office, but under the vast, unforgiving Arizona sky. On the pretext of inspecting a distant, failing well pump, I drove Elias and Caleb to the exact desolate patch of creosote and rock where they had left me. The sun was a hammer, just as it had been 3 years ago. They grumbled about the heat, oblivious, eager to impress the wealthy widow who was their boss. When we arrived, I cut the engine. "The pump is fine," I said, my voice devoid of warmth, "but I wanted you to see this place again." Confusion clouded their faces. I slowly pulled off my sunglasses and the wide-brimmed hat that had become my shield. I watched the recognition flicker, then ignite into pure terror in Elias' eyes. Caleb simply stared, his mouth agape. "Miriam," Elias whispered, the name a ghost on his lips. "You were dead." "The desert is a fickle executioner," I replied, my voice steady. "It chose to save me. It taught me things you could never understand." I stepped back, revealing the legal papers I'd had a lawyer deliver to their empty trailer that morning. Eviction notices and proof of ownership transfer, all signed with my name. "This land was never yours. You tried to steal it, and you tried to murder me for it." I tossed a single, full canteen of water onto the dusty ground between them. It was more than they had left me. "From here, it's about a 2-day walk back to the highway. Maybe you'll make it." I turned without another word, got into my truck, and drove away, not even glancing at them in the rearview mirror. The ranch stretched out before me, peaceful and mine. I wasn't the victim they had created or the widow I had pretended to be. I was Miriam, home at last.